The first light of dawn filtered through the tall, ancient trees, painting the forest floor in shades of gold and green. The air was crisp, carrying a chill that made the leaves shiver. But it wasn't just the wind that moved, it was the whispers, barely audible, like soft murmurs, brushing against the ears of those who knew how to listen. The elders said these were the voices of the spirits, speaking of what had been and what was yet to come. Few dared to hear them. Fewer still could understand them. Kyle, a young warrior with fire in his eyes and mischief in his heart, stepped lightly over a tangle of roots. He laughed, the sound bold and careless, cutting through the sacred hush of the forest. "Do you hear that?" whispered Lahoma, a girl from the tribe with a voice soft like flowing water. She followed close. Behind him, her hand resting lightly on the handle of her hunting knife. The elders. "They say the winds speak," Kyle snorted, shaking his head. "Whispers in the wind. Only old fools and children hear such things. I've seen enough of the forest to know it does not care for warnings." He gestured toward the shadows among the trees. "The forest of forgotten souls is nothing but stories meant to scare cowards." Behind them, the tribe had begun its sacred morning ritual. Smoke curled from the fire pits in spiral dances, carrying the scent of cedar and sage into the cool morning air. The rhythmic pounding of drums echoed through the trees, a heartbeat that connected every living being in the valley. And at the center, shrouded in ceremonial robes, stood the shaman, his eyes closed, arms raised toward the rising sun. Kyle watched with barely concealed impatience. "Let them chant and drum," he muttered. "I have more important things to do than listen to old men ramble to the sky." But the shaman's eyes opened suddenly, piercing through the morning mist. They fell upon Kyle with a gravity that silenced even the birds. "Kyle," the shaman's voice rumbled, carrying both warmth and warning. "You do not understand the forest you mock. The Great Spirit speaks to us through wind, water, fire, and stone. There is a vision. A man who walks with arrogance and mocks the spirits shall wander endlessly, caught between worlds. He will not find rest until he learns humility, and even then, the forest will test him beyond reckoning." Kyle laughed, a short bark of disbelief. "And you think I would be the one?" he said, flashing a grin. "I am no coward, nor am I blind to the ways of the forest." Beside him, the black fox's silent companion, eyes glinting like obsidian in the morning light, shifted uncomfortably. It patted closer to him, brushing against his leg, as if trying to warn him of the truth in the shaman's words. Kyle ignored it, dismissing the subtle signs. Lahoma's eyes narrowed. "You cannot simply walk into the forest and expect nothing to happen," she said. "Even the elders would not dare go too far." Kyle shrugged, brushing a fallen leaf from his shoulder. "The forest is vast, yes, but vastness does not mean danger. I'll show you there is nothing there that can harm me." He turned, stepping toward the edge of the forest where shadows clung like secretive watchers. The tribe continued the ritual behind him, voices rising and falling in sacred cadence. Smoke wove through the trees like ghostly serpents, twisting and dancing in shapes only the trained eye could see. The shaman raised a hand, murmuring prayers, eyes still locked on Kyle. "Do you not see the signs, young warrior?" the shaman called. "Do not let pride blind you to the power that watches from the trees. The forest of forgotten souls is not meant for the careless. The spirits do not forgive, and the forest does not forget." Kyle's laugh was defiant. "Then let them watch. I fear nothing." But as he stepped into the first line of shadowed trees, a chill passed through the clearing. The black fox growled softly, low in its throat, fur bristling. Kyle paused, hand resting on the hilt of his knife, scanning the dense undergrowth. For a fleeting moment, the shadows shifted unnaturally, as if some unseen presence moved just beyond sight. "Would you dare enter a forest? The spirits themselves have marked as forbidden." Lahoma's voice carried over the drums and chants, though Kyle ignored her warning. The trees seemed to lean closer, their trunks twisting, and the wind whispered louder. Words formed from the whispers, but Kyle could not understand them, or perhaps refused to. They spoke in the language of the ancestors, older than the tribe itself, telling of warnings, of wanderers lost to arrogance, of souls trapped where the living dare not tread. A shadow flickered among the trees, a shape darker than night, slipping between trunks and disappearing as quickly as it appeared. Kyle squinted, a shiver crawling down his spine. The black fox padded forward, ears flattened, growling at the emptiness. Still Kyle's bravado did not falter. "I see nothing," he said, "just trees and shadows. If spirits exist, they will have to wait." But the wind carried more than whispers. Now it carried a sense of inevitability. The drums behind him echoed the heartbeat of the forest, and the fire smoke coiled higher, spiraling toward the sky, as if reaching for the Great Spirit itself. Kyle stepped forward, each movement deliberate, unaware that the forest had already begun to watch him in earnest. He had laughed at the warnings, mocked the ritual, and dismissed the ancestors. Now, with the first steps into the shadowed trees, he began a journey that could not be undone. The shadows moved again, more boldly this time, and the black fox let out a sharp bark that seemed to split the morning air. Kyle turned, heart quickening, but saw only the emptiness between the trunks. He took another step, and another, and then, somewhere deep within the forest, a whisper so soft it might have been the wind, or something else entirely, called his name. And Kyle, the voice was not meant for him, and yet he heard it. The forest had begun to remember him. Would you dare enter a forest the spirits themselves have marked as forbidden? The forest of forgotten souls was alive in ways that the ordinary world could never understand. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, scattering into fractured beams that danced upon moss-covered stones. Every leaf, every blade of grass, seemed to vibrate with its own quiet energy. Crystal-clear rivers meandered between ancient trees, their waters singing songs older than memory. Sacred stone circles lay hidden in the shadows, carved with the marks of ancestors long past, their presence still heavy with reverence. Kyle moved deeper into the forest, his footsteps light but confident. He chuckled at the whispers curling through the trees, imagining them as nothing more than tricks of the wind. Behind him, the black fox trotted cautiously, ears pricked and body tense. Its eyes glimmered with unease, reflecting the dappled sunlight as though it could see what Kyle could not. "This forest is nothing," Kyle said aloud, shaking a small branch out of his path. "Just a tangle of trees, like any other place I've walked. I've nothing to fear." Yet, even as he spoke, the forest seemed to shift. Leaves rustled where no breeze blew. Shadows stretched unnaturally between trunks, bending and curling like curious fingers. The fox growled softly, a low warning, urging Kyle to pause. He ignored it, too proud, too certain of his own courage. Far above, perched in the skeletal limbs of a twisted oak, a crow watched with sharp, intelligent eyes. Its feathers shimmered like black glass, absorbing the morning light. The crow tilted its head, studying Kyle's every move. A trickster spirit, some called it a messenger of mischief, and a herald of lessons, unheeded. This was its forest, and Kyle, bold and reckless, had wandered into its domain without respect. The tribe, back at the village, had long taught Kyle the ways of the forest. Every hunt, every ceremony, carried lessons hidden beneath the surface. They honored the animals they took for sustenance, speaking thanks before the first arrow was drawn. They marked the turning of the seasons with dances, songs, and prayers, understanding that harmony with nature was not a choice, but a responsibility. Stories of ancestors were told around the fire, teaching courage, wisdom, and the consequences of pride. Kyle, however, had always considered himself above caution. The warnings of elders seemed like shadows cast on a wall, ever real, easily dismissed, and so he ventured on, deeper into the forest, where sunlight became a fading memory, and the air thickened with a silence that was almost alive. The black fox moved closer to him, brushing against his leg, a silent plea to turn back. Kyle paused, glancing down at it, his lips curling into a grin. "What is it now?" he asked. "Afraid of the trees, afraid of shadows. Don't worry, little one. There's nothing here that can touch me." The fox's tail bristled, and it let out a sharp, short bark, the sound echoing strangely between the ancient trunks. Kyle laughed again, dismissing it as overcaution. Yet somewhere deep in the recesses of the forest, the crow let out a harsh, cawing laugh. The sound was hollow, mocking, and carried the weight of something far older than Kyle's youthful arrogance. As Kyle walked, he noticed subtle signs of the forest's consciousness. Twisted roots seemed to shift just beyond his vision, as though guiding or warning him. Leaves fell in patterns that might have been ordinary, yet the shapes they formed were familiar symbols of the tribe. The crescent moon, a circle of protection, an animal's paw. The forest was speaking, but Kyle could not tour, would not hear. The crow followed, gliding silently from branch to branch, always just out of reach. It darted down occasionally, teasing Kyle with glimpses of shadows that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Its eyes glowed with mischief, as though delighted by the young warrior's folly. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. In the forest of forgotten souls, time had no predictable rhythm. Kyle's hunger, fatigue, and thirst were secondary to his obsession with proving that the whispers, the shadows, the unseen eyes, were nothing. He felt invincible, yet unease gnawed quietly at his edges, whispered in the language only the black fox understood. Then came the first truly unnerving moment. Kyle reached a clearing where the sunlight broke through in jagged beams, illuminating a small stone circle half hidden by moss. The carvings glimmered faintly, their shapes seeming to shift as Kyle approached. The fox crouched low, tail wrapped tightly, ears flattened. A sudden rustle behind Kyle froze him mid-step. He spun, knife in hand, scanning the thick underbrush, but saw nothing. Only the crow, perched on a high branch, watching with an unreadable expression. Its call was soft, almost conversational, as if reminding him, "You are not alone here." Kyle laughed uneasily. "Is that all you have? A shadow in the trees?" But his voice trembled slightly, betraying the first inkling of doubt. The forest answered not with words, but with a movement. A shadow shifted closer, sliding between the trunks, careful, deliberate. Kyle's heart raced, but he could not see it clearly. The black fox stiffened, hackles raised, growling low in warning. Its gaze locked on the shifting darkness, unwavering. Kyle's grin faltered. He felt the forest's presence like a weight pressing against his chest. He had mocked its spirits, ignored the ancestors. And now he realized, though, too late, that this place obeyed rules he did not understand. He believed he was alone. "But the forest has its own eyes," whispered the wind, brushing Kyle's ear with a voice he could not entirely comprehend. The crow flitted down closer, its shadow merging with the shifting darkness. Kyle took a step back, his knife trembling in his hand. For the first time, the thrill of adventure was overshadowed by a quiet, insistent fear. The forest was watching, and it had begun to remember him. The black fox let out a final, piercing bark, urging Kyle to listen, to heed the warnings he had so carelessly dismissed. Kyle froze, torn between the desire to flee and the stubborn pride that had brought him here. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a low hum began to rise, a sound, both familiar and alien, like the voices of the ancestors carried on the wind. It was a song of warning, of memory, of forgotten wanderers who had walked this path before him and vanished without a trace. Kyle's eyes darted to the shifting shadows once more. Something moved just beyond sight, something not entirely of this world, observing him with patience, with intent. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the moment broke. The clearing returned to stillness, sunlight spilling harmlessly across the stone circle. But Kyle could feel that the forest had marked him. Its eyes were upon him. The black fox pressed close to his side, its body tense, a silent reminder of the truth Kyle had long refused to accept. The shadows waited, the whispers waited, and somewhere high above, the crow cawed once more, a sharp note of triumph. Kyle's journey into the forest of forgotten souls had only just begun. Unseen shadow moving closer. Forest watching the deeper, Kyle wandered into the forest of forgotten souls. The thicker the shadows grew, as though the trees themselves bent closer to watch him. Sunlight, which had once filtered gently through the canopy, was now a distant memory, replaced by a muted green twilight. Every rustle, every whispered wind, carried a sense of expectation, an invisible audience, waiting for the young warrior to falter. High above, perched on a twisted oak branch, the crow watched with sharp, intelligent eyes. Its feathers gleamed like black glass in the dim light, catching what little sunlight remained. It tilted its head, observing Kyle's arrogance with amusement. This was no ordinary bird. It was the trickster, a spirit of mischief and warning, testing those who dared the forest unprepared. Suddenly, the crow cawed sharply, a sound that echoed unnaturally, bouncing between the trunks. Kyle froze, scanning the shadows. Out of nowhere, shapes began to take form, a familiar laugh, the flicker of a child's smile, the face of a sibling, long thought distant. Whispered voices called his name, soft and haunting, stirring memories Kyle had buried beneath his pride. "Elahoma," he whispered, stepping forward, but the figure dissolved into mist the instant he neared it. His chest tightened, adrenaline mixing with unease, yet he shook his head and laughed, trying to banish the creeping fear. Foolish tricks, mere shadows of what once was. But the crow cawed again, louder this time, and the illusions multiplied. Faces of his parents, elders, and friends appeared in the trees, their eyes wide with silent accusation. Each carried an aura of sorrow, disappointment, and warning. The forest seemed alive with them, whispering truths Kyle did not want to hear. He gritted his teeth, spinning toward the illusions. "I fear nothing. I bow to no shadow. You are not real." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the first hint of doubt. The crow swooped down, close enough for Kyle to feel the rush of its wings. Its black eyes glimmered with mischief and challenge. It hopped onto a low branch, cawing in a rhythm that mimicked the sacred chants he had learned as a boy. The sound echoed in his mind, weaving through memories of dream catchers dangling over sleeping children, of prayers whispered into smoke, of visions sent by ancestors to guide the living. Kyle's chest heaved. For the first time, he felt the weight of the forest's power. It was not just trees and shadows, this was the living memory of his people, of all who had walked these lands and honored the spirits before him. Yet his pride would not yield. He clenched his fists and laughed. "Is this your test, forest? Your tricks, spirits? I am no child to be frightened by stories or shadows. I will see what lies ahead, and nothing, no illusion, no spirit will sway me." Somewhere, deep within the recesses of the forest, another voice whispered, soft, urgent, and human. It was Taeon, a young member of Kyle's tribe. In dreams and visions, he reached out to warn Kyle, urging him to turn back. He appeared as a fleeting shimmer at the edge of Kyle's vision, his lips moving silently, mouthing warnings Kyle could not yet comprehend. But Kyle ignored him, stubbornness and curiosity warring with the creeping fear. "I do not need warnings," he said aloud, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "I need to see. I need to prove that I am strong." The forest responded, bending reality. Trees shifted positions, paths twisted and lengthened, and the ground beneath his feet became uneven, as though the forest itself were testing the steadiness of his resolve. A faint glow appeared on the path ahead, a soft, almost inviting light that promised discovery, knowledge, and power. Kyle's eyes gleamed with desire. Could he take it? The crow flitted from branch to branch, cawing mockingly, as if whispering, "Do you recognize temptation when it wears the face of your desires?" Kyle did not hesitate. He stepped toward the light, unaware that every step drew him deeper into the forest's trap. Suddenly, the air thickened with mist, curling around him like smoke from a sacred fire. Shapes began to coalesce within it, figures of ancestors he had never met, their faces stern and eyes burning with silent judgment. They reached out, and Kyle felt a pull at the corners of his soul, urging him to humility, to recognition of his arrogance, to respect the forest and the spirits it harbored. Kyle stumbled back, resisting the urge to bow, to apologize, to admit fear. Pride held him fast. "I do not yield," he shouted. "I am Kyle, of the tribe. I fear no spirit, no forest, no illusion." The crow laughed, a high, piercing caw that seemed to vibrate through every leaf and branch. The forest itself seemed to pulse with amusement. Trees groaned, stones rattled, and the mist swirled around Kyle, teasing, testing, holding him in place. Then, as if the forest had grown tired of subtlety, the clearing opened before him. It was vast, impossibly wide, stretching beyond the eye's reach, as if the world itself had expanded and warped around the sacred ground. In the center of the clearing stood a single stone, carved with ancient symbols of protection and memory. Around it, the mist twisted into figures, faces of lost wanderers and previous mockers of the spirits. Kyle's heart pounded. The crow landed atop the central stone, its black eyes glinting with triumph. Its caw echoed, sharp and chilling, as if mocking every step of his journey. The illusions pressed closer, voices rising in harmony with the crow's laughter. The young warrior swallowed hard. Pride and courage clashed with fear and doubt, curiosity with regret. He could feel the forest's judgment pressing against him, demanding recognition, demanding respect he had refused to give. And then a whisper cut through the cacophony, soft, almost tender. "Would you recognize the truth if the spirits themselves wore a familiar face?" Kyle's breath caught. He looked around, seeing the faces of his tribe, ancestors, and loved ones blending with shadows, indistinguishable from the forest itself. Every familiar face carried a story, a warning, a truth he had tried to deny, yet he did not move. Pride anchored him in place, even as the forest seemed to stretch endlessly around him. The crow cawed once more, a sound like ice cracking in the heart of night, and the clearing shimmered, folding reality in ways his mind could barely comprehend. Kyle's journey had reached its first true test. What he would see, what he would face, and whether he could recognize illusion from reality, none could tell. All that was certain, the forest had drawn its lines, and he had stepped inside them. The clearing seemed endless, the mist thickening, shadows dancing with malicious glee, and the crow's laughter ringing louder than ever. Kyle's pulse quickened, his eyes darting, his heart straining against the weight of the forest's gaze. The trickster's challenge had begun. Would you recognize the truth if the spirits themselves wore a familiar face? An endless clearing, the mist of the endless clearing thickened, curling around Kyle like fingers reaching from another world. Every step he took seemed to carry him further from reality, yet the forest itself whispered, guiding, testing, judging. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision, flickering with the shapes of faces he almost recognized. And then, they appeared. Not the trickster crow, not illusions of childhood friends, but the ancestors themselves. Figures from the past, warriors who had once walked the forest of forgotten souls, now shimmering like living mist. Some bore weapons, others carried sacred stones, and all moved with a weight of purpose that Kyle could not dismiss. They did not speak in words he could hear. Rather, their presence filled his mind with images, memories of what had been lost through arrogance and disrespect. He saw warriors who had mocked the spirits, who had rushed blindly into the forest, and whose echoes had never returned to the village. Faces, eyes wide with fear, mouths silent, yet screaming warnings. The forest hummed in response, a vibration that settled in Kyle's chest. The ancestors' message was clear. balance must be honored, arrogance punished, and the cycles of life respected. Every tree, river, and stone in this forest was sacred, a vessel for memory and wisdom. To ignore it was to risk being erased from. Both Kyle's heart pounded. Pride warred with fear, curiosity with regret. I mean no harm, he whispered, almost to himself, though the ancestors did not seem to hear him. His defiance remained, stubborn and unyielding. But even as he walked, the forest shifted around him, making the path uneven, twisting, impossible to retrace. A low rustle made him look up. High in the branches, an owl blinked slowly, its amber eyes steady, unflinching. The owl, sacred too. The tribe, as a messenger and watcher of the night, regarded him as both observer and judge. Kyle remembered the stories of elders when an owl appeared. It carried warnings and guidance, urging attention to what lay unseen. He swallowed hard. The ancestors' visions continued, showing not only the lost warriors, but also the traditions of his people. He saw shamans chanting over fires, smoke spiraling skyward, carrying prayers to the Great Spirit. Children slept beneath dream catchers, protected from the mischief of spirits. Sacred stones were placed at riverbanks and crossroads to honor passage and life. Animals, wolves, deer, crows, and foxes moved as messengers, their every gesture meaningful, every call a story, a warning, a lesson. The forest itself seemed to mimic these rituals. Mist rose like smoke from unseen fires, forming shapes of animals moving purposefully, of circles where stones might be laid, of figures bowing in respect. Kyle's eyes widened as he realized how deeply intertwined the natural world and his people's traditions were. He had walked carelessly, mocking the very rhythms that had preserved life and wisdom for generations. Suddenly, a spectral hand reached toward him from the mist, translucent yet undeniably present. It shimmered with a pale light, fingers outstretched, offering guidance, or perhaps a chance at redemption. Kyle hesitated, pride battling fear, before stepping around it, deliberately avoiding its touch. "I do not need your help," he said, voice trembling slightly, despite his attempt at bravado. The ancestors' eyes seemed to pierce him, their silent warning, heavy and impossible to ignore. But Kyle pressed on, moving deeper into the darkened forest, where even the mist struggled to hold shape. Each step seemed heavier, as though the forest remembered every act of disrespect he had committed, every laugh at the elders' warnings, every mockery of the spirit's domain. In the distance, a river shimmered faintly, reflecting the distorted canopy above. Its waters were clear, pure, yet the reflection was wrong, twisting and bending, as if showing another world. The ancestors' whispers entered his mind again, blending with the rhythm of the forest. Observe, respect, or be lost. Kyle stumbled slightly, his breath ragged. The forest pressed close, shadows moving as if alive. The trickster crow cawed from high above, sharp and hollow, reminding him of the ever-present challenge of pride and curiosity. Kyle shook his head, trying to dismiss the fear curling around him. "It is only a test," he muttered, though the words did not convince even himself. A pair of spectral deer appeared beside the riverbank, their eyes luminescent, their presence serene and commanding. They moved gracefully, circling Kyle, before vanishing into the mist. He remembered the elders' stories. The animals were guardians, guides of wisdom, and messengers of the Great Spirit. Their silent lesson was clear. The forest was alive, every creature a teacher, every shadow a mirror of the soul. Kyle's pride fought against this realization. He wanted to claim bravery, to declare himself untouched by fear or consequence. Yet the visions, the mist, the ancestors, and the animals pressed upon him relentlessly. Each step forward was an acknowledgement of what he had ignored, a confrontation with the arrogance that had brought him here. And then the whispers rose, blending into a chorus that seemed to carry every voice of the forest's memory. Warriors who had walked too boldly, children who had disobeyed, shamans who had failed in their duties, all converged in a single, silent song that pressed on Kyle's mind. Some voices cannot be silenced, even by the foolhardy, he heard, though the sound was neither wind nor voice, but a merging of both. Kyle's heart raced. He understood, in that moment, the weight of what he had mocked. Yet, stubborn as ever, he stepped forward. The spectral hand he had ignored shimmered faintly behind him, reaching once more. Kyle did not turn. He did not touch it. He pressed deeper into the forest, into the darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. The ancestor's eyes followed. The forest breathed, and the crow watched from above, cawing softly, as if amused by the young warrior's obstinacy. He could feel the forest remembering him. Every leaf, every stone, every shadow carried judgment. Every step forward was a dance with consequences he had not yet fully comprehended. And still, he walked on, driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and the arrogance that had first led him here. The clearing faded behind him, replaced by towering trees whose trunks were etched with unseen marks, symbols older than any story Kyle had heard. Mist clung to the ground like living breath, swirling around his legs and whispering secrets of the past. The ancestors had shown him the echoes of those who had come before, but the forest held more challenges, more lessons, waiting to test him again. Kyle did not see it, but the black fox pressed close, a silent shadow of warning, following its young master into darkness. Somewhere above, the trickster crow circled, cawing once more, its voice blending with the forest's whispers into a single, haunting refrain. The forest was alive. It remembered, and it had only just begun to teach its lessons. Spectral hand ignored. Some voices cannot be silenced, even by the foolhardy. Forest continues to test him. The deeper Kyle ventured, the more the forest of forgotten souls seemed alive. Trees stretched impossibly high, their branches twisting like serpents, roots rising from the earth as if to bar passage. Streams reversed their flow, waters bubbling upstream in defiance of nature itself. Shadows shifted, elongating and shrinking, and every rustle in the underbrush carried the weight of unseen eyes. The forest had grown from a place of whispers into a living trial, testing both body and spirit. Kyle's heart pounded, though his face remained set with defiance. He had mocked the warnings, ignored visions, and laughed at illusions. Now, the forest demanded something more, a confrontation with its very essence. A sudden gust of wind swirled around him, carrying whispers that coalesced into voices. They were not merely echoes of ancestors this time, but something more primal, more elemental. He could feel the forest watching, judging, bending reality to see what he was made of. Trees swayed unnaturally, forming corridors that moved and shifted with each step. Mossy stones glimmered faintly, creating illusions of paths that vanished as soon as Kyle neared them. Then, the storm began. Not a storm of rain or lightning, but a storm of spirits. Figures emerged from the mist, shapes of animals, warriors, ancestors, and beings Kyle could not name. They whirled around him, circling, pressing close, testing his resolve. Their presence was overwhelming, a symphony of memory, warning, and judgment. The air vibrated with energy, and Kyle felt as if his very soul were being weighed. He gritted his teeth, lifting his chin. "I am Kyle, I fear nothing," he shouted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Every step became a battle of courage against the pull of the spirits, of pride against humility. Then, a piercing cry shattered the tension. Kyle's black fox, his loyal companion and guide through the forest, disappeared from sight in a flash of shadow. Panic clawed at his chest, sharper than any fear he had ever known. "No," he called, stumbling as he searched the mist. "Come back." The crow trickster swooped from above, its black eyes glinting with amusement. "Lost already?" it cawed. "Alone, without guidance, and still you claim courage. It darted around him, leaving glimpses of false exit paths that seemed open, rivers that appeared calm and inviting. But every route led him in circles, the illusions folding the forest back upon itself. Kyle's stomach tightened, and sweat ran down his brow. The forest had stripped him of the security he had taken for granted, his companion, the familiar ground, the illusions of control. He was utterly alone, yet watched by every presence he had mocked. He fell to one knee, chest heaving. Memories of the ancestors' warnings, of the rituals he had ignored, flashed before him. Dream catchers, dangling sacred stones, placed with reverence, chants rising into the smoke-filled sky, all lessons of humility he had laughed at, now screaming there. Importance in silence. The storm of spirits swirled tighter, pressing, circling, forming shapes he recognized and some he could not. Deer with glowing eyes, wolves that vanished into mist, human silhouettes reaching hands toward him, all demanding recognition, respect, surrender. And then, through the chaos, a single path revealed itself. It glimmered faintly through the mist, marked by subtle light and energy pulsing from the earth itself. Kyle rose, legs unsteady, eyes narrowing. Pride told him to charge forward, to prove he was not afraid. Fear whispered to pause, to bow, to acknowledge the spirit's power. As he stepped toward the path, the crow cawed again, sharp and mocking. Which will it be? Kyle, will pride guide you, or humility? Its words sliced through the wind, cutting to the heart of the choice he had ignored for so long. The path opened into a clearing unlike any Kyle had seen. Mist swirled around a glowing stone circle at its center. Each stone pulsed with energy, resonating a hum that vibrated through Kyle's chest and bones. The air itself seemed to breathe, filled with the memory of generations, of lessons, of reverence and power. Kyle stepped closer, drawn to the stone circle. He could feel the energy thrumming through him, alive, ancient, demanding recognition. Shadows of the spirits swirled above and around him, watching, waiting for his next move. The forest was testing him not with swords or arrows, but with truth. The path forward, the survival of body and spirit, depended on understanding the lessons he had so long ignored. Every instinct screamed to assert his strength, yet a quiet, deeper voice inside whispered otherwise. Respect, humility, acknowledgement. These were not weaknesses, but the key to navigating the forest's trials. Kyle's chest heaved as he knelt at the edge of the glowing circle. He reached out, brushing his fingers across the cool stone. The hum resonated through his body, the mist curling around him, the shadows bending closer. For the first time, he felt truly seen, not mocked, not challenged, but known. Above him, the crow circled, its laughter softened into a hum of anticipation. Kyle realized the trickster had been both tormentor and teacher, forcing him to confront the arrogance he had worn like armor. The forest had stripped away his illusions of control, leaving only truth. Yet even as he knelt, a flicker of fear remained. The black fox had vanished. The path back was uncertain. The spirit's judgment hung like a weight over his shoulders. He was at the midpoint of the trial, at the very heart of the forest, where the living essence of the woods pulsed with memory, wisdom, and challenge. The stone circle glowed brighter, its hum growing into a vibration Kyle could feel in every fiber of his being. He had come seeking adventure, testing the forest, mocking the spirits. Now he understood. The forest did not forgive arrogance. It demanded balance, courage tempered with humility, and recognition of the sacred cycles of life. The crow cawed, one final time, echoing across the clearing, sharp and chilling. The choice is yours, Kyle. Pride or humility. The forest waits, and the lesson will not wait forever. Kyle's hand hovered over the stone. His chest tightened as he realized that this moment could determine more than the rest of his journey. It could determine whether he returned to the world he knew or became another echo in the forest of forgotten souls. and in the silence between the pulses of energy, the mist, and the shadows, he made the first decision that would define him. When the forest tests you, will pride guide you, or humility? The glowing hum of the stone circle faded behind Kyle as he stepped further into the forest of forgotten souls. The air grew colder, heavier, and thick with an energy that pressed against his chest. Shadows seemed to cling to him, brushing against his skin like cold hands. For the first time, fear seeped beneath his pride, and the weight of the forest's memories settled firmly upon him. Then he saw them. Figures emerged from the mist, translucent and flickering like candle flames caught in the wind. Men and women, their faces pale and hollow, wandered aimlessly. Children followed, clutching the hands of parents long gone, their eyes wide with confusion and sorrow. Every figure carried a story etched into its beings, stories of arrogance, disrespect, curiosity unchecked by humility. These were the forgotten souls, the spirits of those who had entered the forest and mocked its power, refusing to honor the cycle of life and the will of the Great Spirit. Kyle froze. His heart hammered in his chest as he realized the depth of what the elders had warned him about. These were not mere shadows or illusions, they were the consequences of his own recklessness mirrored in the lives of others. The spirits moved silently, their mouths opening as if to speak, yet no sound came. Instead, their sorrow reached Kyle in waves, a palpable grief that pressed upon his mind and chest. He took a tentative step forward. One spirit, a woman with eyes like faded embers, extended her hand. Her gesture was not threatening, but pleading an appeal for recognition, for remembrance, for understanding. Kyle felt a tremor of empathy he had never experienced before. He had mocked the whispers of the forest, laughed at illusions, and ignored the lessons of the ancestors. And now, here were the living echoes of those same mistakes, staring back at him, silent but demanding accountability. The black fox, usually at his side, remained absent. Its absence left Kyle with a raw sense of isolation. No guide, no companion, no familiar presence to anchor him, only the forest, its shadows, and the forgotten souls pressing in from all sides. The spirits drifted closer, circling him with a rhythm that mimicked the heartbeat of the forest itself. Kyle's chest tightened as he realized that disrespect leads to isolation, that arrogance traps the soul in endless wandering. He remembered the trickster crow, the illusions, the glowing stone circle, all warnings he had brushed aside. And now, he saw the real consequences of such pride, reflected in the hollow eyes of the lost. A child's voice echoed in his mind, soft and trembling. "We thought we could outwit the spirits." But the forest remembered. Kyle shivered. He had laughed at illusions, at the playful warnings of the trickster. He had walked blindly into trials he barely understood. Now, empathy and fear intertwined in his chest, pressing him to comprehend the stakes of his actions fully. The mist shifted again, revealing more of the forgotten souls. Some were caught in eternal loops of fear, endlessly reaching for companions who would never return. Others stood in quiet despair, observing Kyle as though judging whether he would join their ranks or learn from their mistakes. Their silent pleas formed a tapestry of warnings. Arrogance destroys, mockery isolates, and defiance without humility invites endless wandering. Kyle's knees buckled slightly, and he sank to the forest floor. His hands trembled as he reached out, almost instinctively, to touch one of the spirits. The figure shimmered like moonlight on water, intangible, yet filled with sorrow. He felt its despair seep into him, a lesson carried not through words, but through raw, undeniable emotion. He had never truly understood the gravity of disrespect, of ignoring the cycles of life and the guidance of spirits. A soft rustle made him glance upward. The trickster crow swooped above, cawing mockingly, yet this time there was a subtle undertone of warning in its cry. The illusions of safety it had offered before were gone. The forest had moved past tricks into truth and consequence. Every sound, every movement, every shadow was now a measure of Kayal's awareness and humility. The spirit's presence became more insistent. Faces he had laughed at, shadows he had dismissed, now pressed upon him with a gravity that could not be ignored. Their silent sorrow wrapped around him like chains of memory, forcing him to confront the weight of his arrogance and carelessness. The forest itself seemed alive with judgment, whispering his name from multiple directions. Kayal. He rose slowly, legs trembling, heart pounding with a combination of fear and newfound understanding. Each step forward carried the weight of the lessons he had ignored. Yet within that weight was also a sense of possibility, a chance to learn, to act with humility, to navigate the forest without falling into the same fate as those before him. Still, the shadows pressed closer, their movements deliberate and measured. The mist thickened, swirling around Kyle as if to test his resolve. He could feel the eyes of the forgotten souls on him, the judgment of the ancestors lingering in the trees, the whispers of the Great Spirit riding the wind. Every instinct told him to flee, to abandon the path. Yet he could not. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a faint glow caught his Aja pulse of light, subtle and inviting, yet unfamiliar. It reminded him of the stone circle at the heart of the forest, but this felt different, more urgent, more alive. Kyle realized that his journey had reached a critical point. He could choose pride and risk joining the ranks of the forgotten, or humility and strive to learn the forest's lessons. The whispers rose, overlapping now, forming a chorus of sorrow and warning. Voices of children, warriors, elders, and animals called his name, each one layered with judgment and care. Kyle, Kyle, he swallowed hard, feeling the forest's presence tighten around him like a living embrace. Every instinct screamed that he was being tested, not merely for bravery, but for his ability to see, feel, and understand. The consequences of arrogance were real. They were here, surrounding him, waiting for him to act or to falter. Kyle's breath caught as he realized the stakes of his journey. The forgotten souls, the shadows, the mist, the crow, and the ancestors all were watching, guiding, and judging. One wrong move, one act of pride, and he could be trapped in the forest forever, another echo among the lost. And as the voices swirled around him, whispering, pleading, judging, Kyle faced the question that would shape the rest of his path. Could he escape the fate that swallowed those before him? The forest pressed in from all directions. Mist and shadows twisted, moving like living tendrils, and the voices of the forgotten souls rose in a crescendo of silent lament. Kyle's name echoed repeatedly, Kyle, 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 leaving him alone with the weight of the forest's memory and judgment. He stood at the edge of revelation, caught between pride and humility, between fear and understanding, knowing that the next choice could define not only his survival, but the echo of his soul for all time. Could he escape the fate that swallowed those before him? The forest grew darker with each step Kyle took. Daylight seemed to bend and fold upon itself, leaving him in a twilight where shadows moved independently of their sources. Rivers reversed again, their waters rushing upward, forming chasms that cracked the earth beneath him. Trees arched overhead, roots twisting like walls, corralling him into a maze of living wood. The forest of forgotten souls was no longer just a place. It was a trial made manifest, a mirror of Kyle's soul. Ahead, the mist thickened into shapes he could almost recognize. Faces of loved ones emerged, glowing faintly in spectral light. Their expressions twisted in sorrow, fear, and accusation. His parents, siblings, and friends he had trusted appeared before him, their eyes wide with silent judgment. They spoke not with words but with emotion, forcing Kyle to confront the pride and arrogance he had worn like armor. "You mocked." The spirits, one image whispered without sound. Its gaze pierced him, demanding acknowledgement. Another figure, resembling an elder of the tribe, shook its head slowly, disappointment etched in every gesture. The weight of ancestral expectation pressed on him, and for the first time, Kyle felt humility clawing its way into his heart. But pride was stubborn. Kyle shook his head, lifting his chin in defiance. "These are tricks," he muttered, voice tight. "Illusions, nothing more. I will not bend to shadows." Yet even as he spoke, the forest shifted, making paths vanish and reform, rivers twist into impassable chasms, walls of trees closing in like the grasping fingers of a giant. The trickster crow appeared, swooping low with a sharp caw that echoed unnaturally. Its black eyes gleamed with both mischief and calculation. "Do you truly know courage, Kyle?" it called, cawing in a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the forest. "Or do you only wear pride like armor?" Kyle's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed to flee, to assert his strength, to prove he could dominate the forest and its illusions. Yet the faces of his loved ones, of ancestors, long past, remained fixed upon him, demanding recognition of his faults. He stumbled forward, hands brushing against mossy bark, mist swirling around him as if the forest itself exhaled in anticipation. A river blocked his path, wide and unnavigable, its waters gleaming with an unnatural silver light. Across it, familiar voice called a child he had once cared for, spectral and pleading, urging him toward a path that seemed safe. But something inside warned him. It was a trick, a lure, a test. Pride urged him to cross, to escape easily, to claim victory over the forest. Humility whispered a different choice: acknowledgement, careful observation, and respect for the lessons presented. Kyle's knees shook. He could feel the forest's judgment pressing down like stones on his chest. The mist thickened, carrying whispers from every direction. Voices of lost wanderers, of ancestors, of spirits he had ignored or mocked, all converged into a symphony of warning. A wall of trees shifted suddenly, roots forming spikes that nearly pierced his legs. He jumped back, stumbling over moss-covered stones. The trickster crow cawed gleefully, flying circles above him, mocking his hesitation. "Do you fear the truth of your heart, Kyle?" it cawed. "Or do you still cling to illusions of strength?" Kyle's chest tightened. His pride wrestled with the rising weight of understanding. Every illusion of escape was stripped away. Every false path crumbled. He could feel his own heartbeat, a thunder in his chest that matched the pulse of the forest itself. Courage was no longer about action or defiance. It was about truth, humility, and acknowledgement of mistakes. Ahead, the mist parted slightly, revealing a massive ancient tree at the forest's heart. Its trunk glowed faintly, etched with runes older than any memory Kyle could summon. The tree seemed alive, breathing, watching, and waiting. Its roots formed natural seats and arches. Its branches stretched toward the misted sky, glowing softly, as if carrying the collective memory of the forest and all who had walked its paths. Kyle staggered forward, every step heavy with the weight of what he had ignored. The illusions of loved ones hovered around him still, silent but pressing, yet he no longer turned away. He began to acknowledge the sorrow, the warnings, the lessons embedded in the forest's trial. Humility, though difficult and bitter, began to temper his fear. The trickster crow swooped low one final time, wings beating a rhythm that resonated in Kyle's chest. "The forest asks," it said, cawing softly, "for the truth of your heart. Will you give it, or will pride consume you?" Kyle's legs buckled. He fell to the forest floor, before the glowing ancient tree, chest heaving, sweat and mist dripping down his face. His hands dug into the moss, grounding himself, forcing clarity. He was terrified, exhausted, and vulnerable in ways he had never known, but for the first time, he understood what the forest demanded: honesty, humility, and courage, not in defiance, but in recognition of his own flaws. The glowing tree pulsed gently, and the whispers of the forest softened, like a tide withdrawing, but leaving its impression on the sand. The ancestors' eyes softened, their silent judgment giving way to expectation. The lost wanderers lingered, observing but not pressing, offering a glimpse of what understanding, even partial, could bring. Kyle lifted his gaze to the tree. The runes shimmered faintly, illuminating the clearing with a soft, spectral light. The mist swirled, forming shapes of animals, wolves, deer, foxes, all watching him with silent intensity. The forest's pulse had shifted, no longer purely judgmental, but challenging him to grow, to embrace the courage born from humility. The crows circled above, wings beating slower now, cawing once softly, almost approvingly. "The test begins. Anew," it said, "but your heart has the chance to answer honestly, this time." Kyle sank further into the moss at the tree's base. Exhausted and terrified, yet a strange calm began to settle in his chest. He had faced illusions, natural obstacles, and the mockery of spirits. He had confronted the truth of his own arrogance, and the lessons of lost souls. But he knew the forest was far from done. The trial was not yet complete. A whisper curled around him, soft and insistent, carrying through the mist. "What would you do when the spirits ask for the truth of your heart?" Kyle's fingers pressed into the moss as he closed his eyes. His breath slowed, and for the first time, he felt the possibility of understanding, of survival, of reconciliation with the spirits he had mocked. The forest held its breath, waiting for his next move, while shadows, mist, and whispers pulsed in quiet anticipation. Kyle, at the heart of the forest, lay on the ground, exhausted, terrified, yet trembling with the first true stirrings of courage that came not from pride, but from honest recognition of the truth within him. The forest held its breath. Mist swirled thickly, curling around the ancient tree where Kyle had collapsed, as if waiting for his next heartbeat. Shadows shifted and deepened, carrying whispers that twisted between warning and lament. He rose slowly, muscles trembling, the pulse of the glowing tree beneath him echoing in his chest. This was no longer a trial of illusions, it was the reckoning itself. From the mist emerged the ancestors, more vivid than ever before. Faces once flickering now glowed with clarity and purpose, their eyes locked on Kyle. Warriors, shamans, hunters, and children long lost, all gathered around him, forming a circle that pulsed with energy older than the tribe itself. They spoke in silence, their presence heavy with judgment and sorrow. Every movement conveyed a single urgent message. Mocking the sacred carries consequences beyond mortal understanding. Kyle fell to his knees, chest heaving. The armor that had carried him thus far had cracked, leaving only fear and recognition of his arrogance. I understand," he whispered, voice breaking. "I see now what I have ignored, what I have mocked. Please, guide me." The air rippled, and from the swirling mist, the trickster spirit manifested fully. No longer a crow or fleeting shadow, it rose as a dark, humanoid figure, limbs twisting unnaturally, eyes burning like coal. Its presence radiated menace, claiming the power of the forest itself. Kyle felt its gaze pierce through him, reaching for his soul with invisible fingers, testing whether humility or arrogance would define his fate. "You dare come here," the trickster hissed, its voice a blend of wind and fire. "Mocking forces older than your ancestors, unbending in pride. I claim what is mine." Kyle's chest tightened, panic rising. He stumbled back, the roots of the ancient tree twisting around his feet, anchoring him in place. His mind raced, flee and perish, resist and fail, or surrender to the lesson he had been avoiding. He closed his eyes, drawing a trembling breath. Memories of youth surfaced, chants taught by elders, sacred lessons whispered beside fires, prayers offered with reverence for balance and harmony. He recalled the black fox, the river, the glowing stone circle, all tests he had encountered, and in that moment, he understood. True courage was not in defiance, but in acknowledgement, in calling upon what had been ignored, in humility and respect. Kyle knelt fully, pressing his forehead to the mossy ground, and began to chant. Words, learned in youth, once recited without understanding, now flowed from his lips with intent and heart. Each syllable resonated with the forest, echoing through mist and shadow. The ancestors' eyes glowed brighter, their presence reinforcing his connection to the sacred cycles he had mocked. The trickster shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the clearing and into Kyle's bones. It twisted and lunged, dark and relentless, trying to pierce his soul. Yet with every chant, every invocation of ancestral guidance, Kyle felt a protective current form around him. Shadows clashed with light, the forest itself shifting in response to his newfound humility. The clearing became a tempest of spirit energy. Trees groaned as if alive, roots writhing, rivers reversing violently, winds carrying both whispers and roars. Spirits of the forgotten souls circled, some reaching out with lament, others observing, as if weighing the truth of Kyle's heart. Every element of the forest converged on this single point, the reckoning of a mortal who had mocked the sacred. Kyle's voice rose, steadying as the chant built, a rhythm resonating with the pulse of the glowing tree. Energy crackled around him, forming arcs of light that pushed back the trickster's dark form. The ancestors moved closer, surrounding him in a protective aura of wisdom, courage, and the memory of those who had walked these paths before. The trickster shrieked again, louder, more desperate. You cannot undo what pride has wrought. You are mine. Its limbs twisted violently, merging with shadows that tried to swallow the light of the clearing. Kyle's heart pounded, each chant now a lifeline, each syllable a tether to the forest, to the ancestors, to the Great Spirit. Then, in a sudden convergence, the ancestors raised their hands, their presence intertwining with Kyle's chant. The trickster faltered, its form fracturing under the combined force of humility, acknowledgement, and spiritual guidance. Its shrieks turned to whispers, then silence. As mist swallowed its remnants, Kyle gasped, chest heaving, sweat and mist dripping down his face. The glowing tree pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat, its runes shining brighter than ever. Around him, the forest quieted, shadows retreating, rivers settling, and mist curling softly around roots and stones. The reckoning had reached its peak. The danger had not vanished, but balance had been recognized, humility had been claimed, and the trial transformed into a lesson. Yet, as the clearing grew still, another hush settled, ominous, expectant. Kyle opened his eyes. The ancestors' forms shimmered, beginning to fade into mist. The black fox appeared briefly, its gaze steady and knowing, before vanishing into the shadows, and then, with a final pulse from the glowing tree, Kyle himself was swallowed by mist, leaving the clearing empty, silent, yet vibrating with the memory of confrontation and revelation. The forest held its breath once more. The trickster was gone, subdued, yet not entirely banished. The ancestors' eyes lingered as a reminder, and the echoes of lost souls whispered through leaves and branches. The lesson was complete, but the consequences lingered. The village beyond the forest remained unaware. Kyle's absence would weigh upon them, a silence pregnant with mystery. The forest's judgment was neither cruel nor merciful. It was eternal, impartial, and bound to the cycles of life, balance, and respect. A whisper lingered in the clearing, curling around roots and stones, soft but insistent. Can one mortal undo what pride has done in the face of eternity? The mist shifted, carrying the pulse of the ancient tree and the fading glow of the ancestors. Kyle's fate remained unknown, the forest itself the keeper of his story. For the tribe, the lesson would echo in whispers and warnings, in dreams and rituals, a story of pride, courage, and the eternal call of respect for the sacred. And somewhere in the swirling mist, a figure moved his steps, uncertain, his heart tempered by humility. yet still intertwined with the mysteries of the forest of forgotten souls. Can one mortal undo what pride has done in the face of eternity? Dawn broke over the village, but the usual hum of life was tinged with unease. The tribe gathered near the forest's edge, eyes searching the mist that clung to the tree line. Kyle was gone. The black fox that often trotted at his side had returned days earlier, appearing as if it carried the memory of a journey the tribe could not yet understand. Its eyes glimmered knowingly, and it darted into the underbrush, pausing as if inviting someone or something beyond the veil of the ordinary world. Elders whispered among themselves, recounting what they had long warned. The forest of forgotten souls was not merely a place of shadow and rumor. It was alive, remembering every misstep, every mockery, every arrogance. To enter with pride and disregard for sacred forces was to risk more than life fit, was to risk the very essence of one's being. The tribe followed Kyle's trail cautiously. Broken branches, scuffed moss, and disturbed stones told a story of passage, struggle, and confrontation. Yet there was no sign of him, no definitive proof that he had survived the forest's trials. Instead, faint glimmers of light floated above the path, dancing like fireflies, yet holding the weight of the unseen, a subtle sign of spirit presence. A hint that Kyle's journey had transcended the mortal plane. The children of the tribe lingered at the edges of the search, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. One small girl reached for her mother's hand, whispering, "Do you think Kyle will come back?" The elders' expressions were grave, yet gentle, as they spoke, softly. "Some wander forever," one said, voice low with weight, "and some return with a lesson carved in their soul." The wind carried whispers, not of the living, but of those who had walked the forest before Kyle, lost souls, whose silence now spoke of caution and reverence. The black fox emerged again, pausing at the forest's edge, its gaze shifting between the tribe and the mist. It moved with intent, pausing as if acknowledging the unseen, then vanished into the swirling fog, leaving only faint paw prints and a lingering sense of presence. Elders huddled together, recounting the rituals that might honor Kyle's passage and the forest's judgment. Smoke from fire pits curled upward, carrying prayers for guidance and protection. Drums beat softly, echoing across the clearing, harmonizing with the distant murmurs of unseen spirits. Through these acts, the tribe sought to re-establish balance, acknowledging the sacred cycles that Kyle had confronted in his trial. The forest itself seemed to respond. Rivers that had run backward and chaotic now flowed steadily, their crystal waters reflecting the morning sun. Trees swayed gently, their shadows no longer menacing, and the wind carried soft, melodic whispers that spoke of restoration. Balance, long disrupted by pride and arrogance, was slowly knitting itself back together. Yet the mystery of fate remained. No one had seen him return, no trace of his body, no footprints beyond the last glow of the ancient tree. Only the signs of struggle and the lingering presence of spirits hinted at the spiritual battle he had faced. Some elders nodded silently, knowing that his journey had continued, not in the world of the living, but somewhere beyond, in a plane where lessons were carved directly into the soul. The tribe gathered at the fire that night, faces lit with flickering amber light. Children listened as elders spoke of Kyle's trials, how arrogance had led him to test the forest, how pride had been measured against the spirits, and how humility had been the key to survival. "Remember this," one elder said, voice soft but firm. "To mock the spirits is to mock life itself. Respect, humility, and courage are not only teachings, they are lifelines." Ghostly lights shimmered faintly around the fire, and a whispering wind carried echoes of Kyle's name. The black fox appeared once more, silent and watchful, then vanished into the night, leaving the tribe with the unshakable sense that Kyle's spirit linked with learning, growing, and carrying the forest's lessons further than any mortal could fully witness. In the quiet moments, as the village slept, the mist at the forest's edge seemed alive, pulsating softly like a heartbeat. Shapes flickered among the trees, reminders of the forest's eternal memory. The ancestors, the lost wanderers, the spirits of those who had walked before Kial, all lingered, forming a tapestry of caution, reverence, and timeless wisdom. Children spoke in hushed tones, sharing the whispers they had heard, faint echoes of Kyle's laughter, soft warnings, and the black fox's watchful eyes. These tales became part of the tribe's oral memory. Stories to be passed from one generation to the next, not just for adventure, but as lessons of respect, humility, and the enduring power of the sacred. The tribe's daily life resumed slowly. Hunters went into the woods with greater reverence. Storytellers recounted the mystical dangers beyond the familiar paths, and ceremonies were performed with renewed understanding of balance and the great spirit's watchful eye. Each ripple in the river, each rustle of leaves, each flicker of mist became a reminder. The forest had not only tested Kial, but the hearts of all who heard his story. The wind carried another whisper, faint yet unmistakable, curling around the village. The firelight and the dreaming children. Some wander forever, and some return with a lesson carved in their soul. And in the shadowed edge of the forest, the black fox paused one final time, ears twitching, eyes reflecting a light that seemed both earthly and otherworldly. It vanished again, leaving the tribe to honor the lesson, respect the sacred, and wonder at the fate of the young warrior whose courage, humility, and reckoning had reshaped their understanding of the world and the spirits that guarded it. Kyle's journey was no longer solely his own. It had become part of the tribe's living memory, a tale whispered on winds, reflected in rivers, carried in the hum of trees, and etched into the hearts of all who understood that disrespect for the sacred comes with consequences beyond life itself. Some wander forever, and some return with a lesson carved in their soul. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting amber and gold across the forest of forgotten souls. Shadows stretched long between the trees, yet the air no longer carried the oppressive weight of danger. The rivers ran clear, their waters reflecting the colors of the setting sun. Leaves rustled gently, whispering secrets of cycles renewed and lessons learned. Harmony had returned, delicate yet undeniable, woven into every branch, every stone, every ripple of wind. At the forest's edge, the tribe gathered in quiet reverence. Fires burned in small circles, smoke curling upward in ceremonial spirals that mingled with the fading mist. Elders spoke softly, recounting Kyle's journey, the trials he had faced, the pride he had carried, the humility he had finally embraced. Children listened wide-eyed, absorbing the story, not as entertainment, but as a lesson etched into the memory of their people. The black fox appeared silently, stepping from the shadows with the grace of one who belonged to both worlds, earthly and spiritual. Its eyes glimmered with quiet knowledge, reflecting the lingering presence of the spirits and the echoes of Kyle's courage. It paused at the tree line, watching as the tribe performed their rituals, then vanished again, leaving a sense of calm that settled over all who witnessed its passage. Ancestors' whispers threaded through the wind, faint but persistent, carrying echoes of those who had walked the forest before. The lost souls shimmered at the edges of vision, figures that had been trapped by pride, sorrow, and disregard. Yet as the tribe moved with respect, as chants rose softly and offerings were laid upon the earth, the shadows of the forgotten gently faded, absorbed into the balance they had once disrupted. The elders guided the tribe through rituals of remembrance and honor. They placed stones in circles, painted markings in the soil, and offered prayers that spoke of courage, respect, and the Great Spirit's guidance. Each act was deliberate, a renewal of harmony between human and spirit, mortal and sacred. Stories of Kyle's reckoning became woven into song and legend, a cautionary tale designed to teach generations to come. One elder, voice trembling with both sorrow and pride, addressed the children directly, Remember this, she said, pointing toward the forest. The spirits of this place do not forgive lightly. Pride blinds, arrogance deceives, but humility guides the heart safely through the unseen paths. Kyle walked those paths and learned what many cannot, yet his journey is not just his, is ours. Shared through every whispered wind, every river's flow, and every story we pass along. The children's eyes followed her gaze, imagining the forest alive with unseen watchers, ancestors, spirits, and the echoes of the lost. Even the black fox seemed to linger in their minds, a silent reminder of guidance and guardianship. In the flickering firelight, the forest no longer felt threatening, but secreta, living teacher that demanded reverence. Night fell slowly, painting the sky with stars that seemed brighter than usual, as though reflecting the renewed balance below. The village slept under the watch of ancestral eyes, carried in whispers on the wind. The forest, once a place of peril and judgment, had become a testament to the consequences of pride and the power of humility. The rivers whispered their renewed song, and leaves danced in quiet harmony. Shadows shimmered briefly as if the lost souls were passing through, acknowledging that their lessons had been remembered. Then they vanished, absorbed into the cycles of life, leaving only peaceful echoes behind. At the horizon, the last light of sunset reflected off the stone circles and the trees' bark. The black fox appeared one final time, its silhouette framed against amber skies. It paused, eyes glinting with the knowledge of secrets only the forest could hold, then disappeared silently, a guardian returning to its unseen world. The elders and tribe continued to share Kyle's story, ensuring that every child, every young hunter, every storyteller remembered the lesson. Harmony with nature is not optional. Respect for the sacred is not negotiable, and humility is the path to survival and wisdom. The forest itself had carved these truths into the hearts of those who walked its edge, ensuring that its memory and its teachings would endure. And yet, the forest remained alive with potential and mystery. The wind shifted, carrying faint whispers, half voices of ancestors, half warnings to the living. Will you walk with humility, or will the forest of forgotten souls claim your pride? As the tribe settled for the night, the camera of imagination pans back to the forest. The mist curls softly over rivers and stones, the stars shimmer above, and the black fox's presence lingers as a silent guardian. Every element, the wind, the leaves, the rivers, and the echoes of spirits reminds all who watch and listen that the forest never forgets, and it never forgives carelessness. The story of Kyle, his trials, his reckoning, and the lessons of the forest became part of the living memory of the tribe, a story to guide every future step, a moral embedded in the landscape, a timeless echo of respect, courage, and humility. And so, as the night deepened, the forest of forgotten souls remained, ancient and watchful, carrying the whispers of ancestors, the lessons of lost souls, and the promise of guidance to any who would enter with the right heart and the courage to learn. The wind carries one final whisper, curling around the stone circles, trees, and sleeping village. Will you walk with humility, or will the forest of forgotten souls claim your pride? The forest watches, waits, and remembers.